Welcome back to Indiana Men's Basketball Weekly presented by Big Ten Plus. I am your host, Carlo Barone. That's Abby Haymond. Abby, what a week for Indiana Men's Basketball, losing a heartbreaker on Tuesday and then coming back and getting a much-needed victory against Illinois on Saturday. Is this way of play sustainable, though?
You know, honestly, my instant reaction is no. Just because I feel like they have played multiple games over the past few weeks, and they've all been decided by less than 6 points. And while it works sometimes, it just takes one last-second shot for that other team to take the game and win it from there. So obviously we saw against Illinois a very ugly first half from the Hoosiers. They finally came back out in the second and were able to turn things around and just win it there at the end. But in the long run, this is not a sustainable way of play for the Hoosiers if they want to keep moving forward.
Like you mentioned, all it takes is one shot, and Illinois had that opportunity at the end of the game, but the ball rimmed out, and Indiana won by 3 instead of going to overtime. So with that close win against Illinois, you've got to think the Hoosiers, they're in a weird spot because they need to keep up with the Big Ten standings, but they have number 1 Purdue on Saturday. They've got Michigan State this week. We've got a lot going on. So for more on Indiana's second half adjustments against Illinois, here's what Mike Woodson had to say after the game.
And, you know, you got to applaud Illinois and how they played. They were without their best player, and they were trying to move up too. And they played that way. But we made the plays coming down the home stretch I thought that we needed to make in terms of getting stops and Jalen's 2 big free throws, the jump shot that he made, and then getting it out of that double team right at the end there.
We just heard Woodson's thoughts on the second half, but what did you see, Abby, differently in the second half for Indiana to close out the win against Illinois?
Well, I honestly think that coming out after halftime, defensively, Indiana really stepped it up. I also think that Miller Kopp popped off with a few key threes that kind of got things going for the Hoosiers, opened up the floor. And after that, they were really able to get that energy, that momentum going. And once they just get those shots to fall, they kind of just kept going from there. And it was just a completely different team in the second half, which obviously got them the win, but just barely.
Yeah, you mentioned Miller Kopp hitting shots. Another person hitting shots, Jalen Hood-Schifino. I mean, 1 of 8 in the first half, came out 11 points in the second, hit a key 3, and had a couple of key plays that ended up winning the game for them. They were down most of it, but Jalen's kind of the one that pushed them towards the finish line. I think he is personally the X factor of this team. I mean, Trace is going to get his, and Miller, he gets some opportunities, but the person you can really rely on is Jalen Hood-Schifino. So moving on to our favorite segment, Swish or Miss. I will ask Abby a few questions, and if she agrees, she will say swish. If she does not, it will say miss. Pretty self-explanatory, but the first one, Trace Jackson Davis goes in Michigan State on Tuesday and gets his second triple-double of his career. Swish or miss?
I'm going to be bold here, and I'm going to say that this is a swish. In terms of points, I think against Michigan State, this is honestly something that he could accomplish. He had 26 against Illinois, obviously in the 20s every game before that. I think as long as he brings that defensive energy and just brings that momentum, that he will be able to accomplish that. Pretty bold, but I think he can do it.
Next question. Indiana holds Michigan State on the road to under 65.
I also think this is a swish. Right now, their opponents are averaging around 67 points per game. In Michigan State, they are not getting quite there, just around 65. So I think that this is something pretty reasonable.
Final prediction for Tuesday's game. Indiana wins on the road by 10+.
I am going to say miss here. The past few games, they have not been able to do this. Just with the way that they've been playing, I don't really see it happening.
Yeah, we've got quite the opportunity here in the Big Ten for the last 2 weeks. Now moving on to more of a general look at the Big Ten standings, do you think Indiana gets a top 4 seed when it's all said and done?
This is really tough. I think it could go either way, but I'm going to be optimistic here, and I'm going to say yes. I think that they will beat Michigan State, and I know that this is a hot take, but I honestly think that they're going to beat Purdue in Mackey Arena. And I think as long as they're able to win those 2 games, I know there's some teams directly underneath IU that could easily step up and knock us off, but I think if they can win those 2 games, that they'll be able to hang on.
A key game that we haven't really talked about, obviously, Northwestern at Maryland. Maryland undefeated at home for the season with wins against IU and Purdue, 2 of the top teams in the Big Ten, Northwestern being the third one there. That's going to be a key game for a lot of people, especially Indiana, because if the Hoosiers win against Michigan State and they beat Purdue, and Maryland beats, or Northwestern rather, beats Maryland at home, then they'll be moving up in the standings.
Yeah.
But if Northwestern ends up losing to Maryland like other teams have, it gets really interesting. But that game on Saturday is also something to notice. So big games, the last 2 weeks should
Lots
be
of moving
very,
pieces, you're right.
very entertaining. Thank you so much for joining us, and stay up to date on everything Indiana Hoosiers. Check out Indiana on BTN on Twitter. I'm Carlo Barone.
And I'm Abby Haymond. We'll see you soon.